All right.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 456 of the Dead Robot
Stop,
Society.
you're doing it wrong.
What?
I, too, am allowed to be a dick.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 456 of the Dead Robot Society. I'm Terry Mixon. Joining me, Paul E. Cooley.
What's
How you
up?
doing, man?
What's up?
It feels like we just talked.
Holy crap. It feels like we've been talking for hours.
And this is true, folks, because we went ahead and we recorded this particular intro mere seconds after we recorded the intro for last week's show, because Paul, right now, as you're listening to this, is lounging on the deck of a ship on the Danube.
No, I would never do anything like that. I would never be lounging. Lounging? I don't lounge.
He secretly wears a leisure suit when he's on vacation.
God. You know what they need to do? They need to bring back Leisure Suit Larry on the consoles. They just need to have, they just need to have it like redone in HD with all the filth put back in and put that shit back up on PlayStation Store. It'd be awesome. If you don't know what we're talking about, go Google that shit. Leisure Suit Larry.
It's totally true.
Go
so
ahead.
Just get that visual in your head right now of Paul sitting on a riverboat. Well, it's not really. It's a river ship. It's not like a paddle wheel boat or anything. But sitting on the ship, the deck of a ship on the Danube with his feet propped up, typing out something on his iPad in a leisure suit, because that's what he's doing.
Yeah, that's exactly what's going on. No, right now I'm scouring Hungary, Austria, and Germany for future.
Looking for the next place to plant your evil Garaga so that it can cause more trouble.
Yes, pretty much. That's kind of the idea. That's pretty much the idea. yes. And of course, just because
what's going to happen, don't you? You're going to go over there and you're going to be thinking, I'm going to write a Garaga book here. And what's going to happen is you're going to say, no, it's going to be a Cold War thriller. Wait a minute. Why can't it be Garaga and a Cold War thriller?
There's no reason it can't.
You could do both. You're in the perfect place to research a Cold War thriller because you're going to be traipsing right through the Iron Curtain.
Well, the remains of the Iron Curtain.
Well, where the Iron Curtain sat.
Well, I was in East Germany before the wall fell. So, I mean, I was there a year before the wall fell, I think. Yeah. So in addition to getting to see Pink Floyd play live at the Berlin Wall, I got to see and go through Checkpoint Charlie. I got to go to the Pergamon where you could still see the bullet holes, because the Russians wouldn't let them ever repair the damage done during the 45 or 44 not invasion. What do you want to call it? March? I don't know what to call it. Well, basically, they rolled into Berlin. So, I mean, it was. We both lived through some interesting parts of history, but the things I got to see before the wall fell, before Russia became a friend of me as opposed to just an enemy. The history that we lived through has been pretty amazing in a lot of ways, and I'm just damn glad I got to see it from the perspective of how it affected the folks over there, right, that were closest to it. So it was, there were points where when we took the train from East Berlin or from West Berlin to Munich, you had to go through, if you look at how far east Berlin actually is in Germany, that trip took us through Eastern Germany all the way until we got to the West. And so we got to see the tanks that were pointed at the trains as we were going down the way. It was really surreal. It's hard to believe it ever even happened, but it was really surreal. But I'll remember that shit till I die. So I have to say that, when you get a chance to travel, you should definitely do it.
I don't know how many folks know this, but when I worked for NASA back in 1999 and 2000, I spent 2 separate trips living in Moscow, the city, capital of Russia, for 4 months and for another 2 months, a total of 6 months that I lived there and conducted my life as not a citizen, but as a resident of there working for a foreign power.
Wow.
And Well, that's got its own interesting stories to go along with it. So when you write your Cold War thriller, maybe I can help toss in a few tidbits.
When are you writing your Cold War thriller?
I've never written any thrillers. I'm not sure that that's the genre that I could write in.
Bullshit.
I would love to. I like reading thrillers.
If you think I can write romance, there's no reason why you can't write a thriller. It's not that difficult.
When did I say you could write romance? I'm just kidding.
You said you're waiting for my romance novel.
Just because I'm waiting for it doesn't mean I think you can actually do it.
Oh, you wound me, sir. You wound me.
No, I know that you can. I know that you can.
Wound me. I'm here to wound
but I don't know. I don't know that I could write a thriller because it's so fast paced. I probably could, but I'm not quite there yet. I'm not quite there in my confidence level to write something like a thriller.
Well, I mean, I went from writing horror to writing thriller to now writing this quasi space opera horror thriller thing. So I think it's possible. I think you can do it.
You just got to keep piling it on. Every chapter you need to be going, how can I make this worse?
Like I said on an episode, I don't know when that was, relatively recently. Who are these people? What do they want? And how can I keep them from getting it? That's how to tell a story. That's all you need.
Yeah, but when you're writing a thriller, it's not only how can I keep them from getting it, it's no and furthermore.
Yes, but that's part of the fun. How can I mess this up so every solution they come up with leads to another disaster? So it's like the old tar baby from Uncle Remus, that, oh, well, I'm just going to punch this thing and it'll fall over. Now my fist is stuck. Oh, well, let me punch it again. Now my other fist is stuck. What about a kick at it? Yeah, now my feet are stuck and now I'm completely stuck to this tar baby. What do I do? And that's kind of how you write a thriller, is just figuring out how to extricate them from the mess they've gotten themselves in.
Every chapter's tagline is, oh, shit.
Yeah, that's pretty much. It's like chapter 1, oh, shit. Chapter 3, oh, shit again. Yeah. Just keep piling on the manure until everybody's drowning in it, and then, throw them a lifeboat or lifeline.
I'm afraid that my whole idea of thrillers is pretty well messed up by Tom Clancy.
I read several Clancy's, and I stopped reading him because he
died.
No, because they became so formulaic. It was just the same shit over and over again, and that's fine. If you really dug his stuff, that's great. That's wonderful. I'm sure that there are some folks out there who could accuse me of writing the same story. I'm one of them, but it just didn't interest me anymore as a reader. It was just the same old crap. I didn't see a growth in his writing. I didn't see a growth in his characterization. I didn't see any kind of growth at all. And I think it just kind of irked me as a reader, and I just didn't find what he was talking about interesting at all anymore. So
I can accept that.
I think there's a point where you just kind of, it's the same thing with Dan Brown. I read 3 of his books. I'm done. I'm good.
You and just about everybody else, maybe? I'm not sure. After Inferno, I'm not quite sure, where you go from there.
I don't even know what Inferno is.
It's his latest movie that I looked at its scores. I haven't seen it yet. I was going to watch it, and I saw the Flickster reviews on it. I was like, I didn't read the reviews, but I looked at the numbers. Apparently, most of the people that watched it didn't particularly care for it.
One of those things you throw on Netflix and go, please don't suck. Please don't. Oh, shit.
Actually, that's just about it. It was on Netflix, and we decided to watch instead. We watched The Killing Joke. That was a big mistake. That was a big mistake.
Why did that bring you down?
It was a really poorly told story.
That's unfortunate.
An exceptionally poorly told story, because it looks like they went ahead and started the story off being narrated by Batgirl and telling a different story. And then 25 minutes in, the Joker shows up, shoots Batgirl, she's out of the picture, and the rest of the story is about Batman, and even the villain that was there in the first part is no longer seen. It's over.
Yeah, see, it doesn't sound like that to me, like they translated the graphic novel well at all, which is unfortunate.
From what I hear, Kim, the comic book guys, commented on my wife's post on Facebook about this, that they mashed together 2 different things. The original graphic novel, and then they needed more time, and so they pasted on the Batgirl lead-in, completely unrelated, and it didn't do them any favors whatsoever.
That's unfortunate. That's really unfortunate.
So I would have rather watched Inferno. I really would have. Actually, I think I'm going to watch Passengers next because it got lambasted, but I'm not sure that it was. I'm not sure how much of the lambasting was because people took issues with some of the things that the plot did, as opposed to the actual movie itself.
The movie y'all should watch is The Void, because it's now on Netflix. You should watch that. I reviewed it for Patreon. If I tried to explain it, it wouldn't make any goddamn sense. It's a horror movie, but it's the good horror. It's
more like a thriller type thing in space with evil thingies.
No, it's along the lines of Cthulhu kind of stuff.
Oh, okay.
It's pretty insane. It's just
Cthulhu insane. I like that.
Well, it's just it's low budget, and they did a great job with what they had to work with, and the writing was good. I love the acting and the way it was presented. It doesn't even try and explain itself. It goes crazy from 5 minutes in, and after that, it's just like, what the hell is going on here? You just want to keep watching because it just gets more and more insane. So I definitely recommend that one.
Well, I've got a couple of weeks till you get back, so I could be doing that.
Get on it. Get on it. Get on that shit.
Jump on it. Jump on it.
Oh, God. You're so white. Anyway.
That reminds me, as a total non sequitur, that we were driving down to Galveston yesterday, and there was a hip hop dance studio sitting beside the road, a dance studio that had, hip hop dancing as advertised in the window. And I told the wife, I said, we should pull over and go in there and roll our shoulders forward and go, hi, we're white people here to learn about hip hop.
I'm white and I would like to learn how to have rhythm. Can you teach me rhythm?
And she said, I'm not sure that would work out so well.
You might be surprised.
I might be surprised.
There was a story, I can't remember if it was Run DMC or who it was, where when they went to Boston for their first concert, and it was a predominantly white audience, he literally had to get on the mic and say, this is the part where you move your arms. This is the part where you dance. This is how you dance. And basically teach the audience how to do what they were supposed to do.
And when I say that, I'm not sure that, when I'm saying things might not work out, it's not because I think, anything bad would happen. It's because I have no rhythm. That's where the bad things happen.
Yeah.
Trying to teach Terry to dance, period, is a bad idea. Trying to teach Terry to dance hip hop, I think you're really pushing it.
I think if you try to learn hip hop, you break a hip.
Down in West Philadelphia, born and raised. I don't think so.
Right.
No. Speaking of hip hop, that's in hip hop, but rap anyway. I was at the gym the other day and I heard a rap song being performed. And I was listening to the lyrics, and it was the song from the Jeffersons.
Moving on up.
Yes. And I was like, what?
That's kind of cool.
I was like, these words, they're very familiar to me. And I'm like, somebody really had to stretch. And I said, I wonder how many of these young people here have no idea where these words came from.
I think we have that all the time. We've had a couple of posts on the Facebook group about, hey, is this too obscure a reference? Will anybody below the age of 40 get this? And I looked at it and went, nope. They're not going to get that. I think it was a reference to Mork and Mindy, and I was like, no.
It was a Shazbot reference.
Shazbot reference. Like, no, that's
fly, be free.
Yeah. Bonk. Great show. I don't know if it's on Netflix or not, but if you're not aware of that, that's how Robin Williams' career really got kicked off. So you should go check it out. It's pretty funny.
Classic stuff, man.
And there's a Luna. Well, I guess we should get this.
That's a good place to jump into the episode.
Yes, exactly. Let's do that.
And joining us today is Michael Cooper, who goes on Amazon under the name of MD Cooper. Michael, thanks for coming on the show, man.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
I got to say that I only chanced into your work fairly recently and have listened to the first 3 books in audio because I haven't been able to bring myself to listen to the 4th one yet because it's so far away until the next one happens. I don't want to leave myself in this big gap waiting for the next set of audiobooks. But they were awesome, sir. They were amazing.
Thank you.
Why don't you take a moment and introduce yourself to our listeners?
Certainly. So again, I'm Michael Cooper. I go by MD on Amazon because when I first published, there was another Michael Cooper on Amazon who writes science fiction who has since disappeared, leaving me with a pen name for the rest of my life now.
You killed him. Just admit it. You killed him.
I might have done
got rid of the body.
That might have happened, but we're on video, so I can't say for sure about anything like that.
I refuse to admit that I did that.
Yep, those are words that will never leave my lips.
Right.
I've been writing, I think since I was 11 years old. I put down Return of the King, and I didn't want the story to end, so I started writing really crappy fantasy novels. As a teenager, there was a ring and there was a Dark Lord and he had a mountain and all that sort of stuff.
And there was angst, teenage angst.
A lot of angst, yeah. I published a poetry e-zine for a while as a teenager. So yeah, I had all sorts of teenage angst. And then I eventually, it was actually after seeing the movie Firefly, I said, you know what? I want to write science fiction. I've been reading science fiction forever. And I thought, why am I writing this fantasy stuff? I want to write stuff like Firefly. And I didn't. I wrote hard science fiction, like Firefly, but it was great. It got me going. I wrote a book called Destiny Lost, which is the one that Terry hasn't listened to yet because he's afraid of the weight he's going to have.
I'm so afraid. You're going to kill everyone I love.
No one dies ever. Honest, I swear.
I already know that's not true.
And so, and it was great. That was back, I realized just the other day, that was actually back in 2006, I wrote that. And then I started shopping it around to get it published. And what I realized is that if I go and try and publish this novel myself, it will probably take me the rest of my life to get like 4 or 5 books out. Because you got to get the agent and you can't shop multiple agents at a time. Although apparently now everyone says I could have, but I didn't. And then, that they may or may not ever even get you a publishing deal and so on and so forth. So, you know what? I'm just going to go and self-publish this stuff. And I did, and I knew nothing, and I did everything wrong. My wife wrote young adult. So she's like, well, I know all these people that do blog tours. So I got my hard science fiction book on all these young adult and urban fantasy blog tours, which basically probably ruined my also bots for some time. I had no idea anything like that was going on. But I sold some books and felt encouraged enough to keep writing. And then last summer, I released my 3rd book in my series. And my wife also took Mark Dawson's Facebook ads course. And within 3 months, I was making a living wage from my books. So, and then in January 1st, I retired from software development and became a full-time author.
You and Paul both software developers. What's wrong with you people?
What? Yeah, it says the guy who used to work for NASA as a computer person.
Yes, it's true. There's a trend here.
You're a person built out of computers? Like, what does that even mean, a computer person?
Well, I don't know how to describe what he did. It's quasi system administrator.
I started at NASA as a Linux system administrator. Okay. And then I moved into a position that they called group administrator, which was basically the first line help desk for the flight controllers that did all kinds of stuff for them to make sure that when they looked at the computer, what they saw is what they wanted to see. When they clicked a button, what happened is what they wanted to happen.
So you can't just say to them, have you tried turning it off, turning it back on again? Eh?
Oh, I cannot begin to tell you the number of times I have actually said those words.
all three of us could have been in the IT crowd. Trust me.
Oh yeah, for sure.
I was laid off from NASA 2 years ago and became a full-time author, not by choice at that particular point in time. And I'm just grateful that I didn't sink.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff working against new authors.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I've seen you talk about your plans for your universe. Is it Aeon 14? How is that pronounced?
Aeon 14.
Aeon 14.
Yeah.
You said that, I've got this plan for these 20 books. How can you possibly even see that far into the future?
Well, so to give you the even crazier bit of information, I plan to release those 20 books between now and December.
Okay. All right. We're obviously insane.
Oh.
Obviously insane.
Yeah. Well, granted, I have some co-authors now working with me. And so they account for, I think they'll account for 6 or 7 of those books. And 6 of those books are novellas as well. So I am kind of cheating when I say 20 books by the end of the year. But it's still going to be 8 or 9 full-length novels between now and the end of the year that will come out as well.
That is, wow. That is, I don't know the right word. It's audacious seems a little under pressing on that one.
I reserve the right to fail miserably.
Dean Wesley Smith says that he has a process called failing to success. He sets these high goals for himself, and even when he doesn't make them, he still succeeds because he's put so much effort into it. So failing to success, that's what it is.
I think that's going to be my motto for the rest of the year. Yeah, I'm going to fail to succeed, or succeed to fail, or something.
Fail to get to success. So you're failing to success.
I'm game for that. Yeah.
There you go.
The way that I can, I guess, so to sort of answer your actual question, though, the way that I can see it all is I've spent a lot of time working out the universe that all of my stories take place in. I think I spent 2 to 2.5 years just doing solid research before I started writing a lot of it. You know, I laid down a progression of technology from where we are right now all the way up to the 90th century. Worked out what technologies they have at certain eras and stuff like that. And then the whole point of the series is this massive interstellar war that occurs in the 90th century. There's actually been several interstellar wars, but this one's the largest one. And I was going to write the whole thing in 5 or 6 books, but I realized that was going to be almost impossible. So I decided to instead take the story, because the story was at such a high level. And the interesting thing is I saw a bunch of people reviewing David Weber's books. And they were saying that the Honor Harrington books have become less interesting because it's all very high level now. It's all just admirals sitting around a table talking about strategy and stuff like that. And it had lost sort of some of the flavor the books used to have. So I thought, crap, that's kind of what I was planning on doing. Was the story would kind of get all big like that.
Look what a big failure that guy is. Who's ever heard of him, right?
Yeah. That's true. It's like, well, maybe following his footsteps wouldn't be a bad idea anyway. Although I already saw the reviews for one of his books that came out recently.
Yeah, the last one was a lot of rehashing, and I think it reasonably got panned because of him reusing plot lines. So yeah, it was too similar to the book that came in front of it. I'm a big David Weber fan. I've been so for a long time, and there's nothing wrong with doing things like him. Just please, God, please, fewer meetings than David Weber. Fewer meetings.
Well, that's to distill it down. That's sort of what I got from what a lot of people were saying, is that there seems like a lot of meetings. And I thought, okay, well, I don't want to do that, because to be honest, I don't really want to write a whole whack of books about meetings either. I just left IT, I'm all set with that. So what I ended up doing is I decided to take the story down a level to a bunch of other, just sort of move into some of the other smaller characters who are going to be on the front lines a lot more. And that way I'd be able to tell a story a lot more personally, and I think it would have a lot more emotional impact too, because you're actually seeing people on the front lines of this war as they're fighting it. And the crazy thing too is, this is one of the areas where my science fiction diverges from a lot of other people's science fiction, is I did the math on population expansion, and I realized that it gets insane. I took modern day Earth, and I worked out the population expansion to the year 4000, and I realized there'd be 7 trillion people in the solar system alone. And then I said, well, what's a navy look like for 7 trillion people? And I looked up, how many naval warships there are per person in the United States. And I said, okay, now what if they're on a war footing? And I did the math for how many naval warships there were per person in World War II, which of course the United States built in 3 years. And I said, wow, there would be a 10 million ship navy in one star system alone. People are going to have a lot of trouble with that. So I scaled it back to 1 million. So they only got 1 million ships.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I'm glad you went ahead and put a little restraint there to keep it from getting out of hand.
Yeah, that's what I focused. Yep.
I don't think the solar system could support 7 trillion people. I don't think there's any freaking way.
If you took the mass of Mercury, just the planet Mercury, you could build a Dyson sphere from that. So a sphere all the way around the sun at the orbital point of Earth.
I just read that. They talked about that in the Bobverse novels that you haven't read yet, Paul.
Yeah, so so Mercury alone has the mass to actually build a much larger navy than 1,000,000 warships. In my story as well, Mercury's gone and Uranus is gone. They've completely strip mined those planets by that point as well.
I don't know what I would do without Uranus.
It's a tricky question, yeah. And they sold Neptune out to the scattered disk, which is one of the groups in the solar system. But anyway,
let me explain. When I was going through this through your first set of novels, I was like, the geography doesn't seem quite right.
Nope.
And I couldn't place it in my head what was missing.
I actually got a 1-star review because if you notice, the opening scene in my first book takes place on Pluto, which is in orbit of Jupiter.
I did notice that. And I figured, okay, I figured some movement had taken place here.
And I got a guy who flamed me in the reviews for that. But there's the first book I'm actually pretty subtle because the solar system is so wildly different from what people are used to. I'm like, I don't want to write a technical manual for how to terraform the entire solar system. So the characters drop hints. So there's actually a character in that part that says, the Jovians, they had to collect the whole set. So just sort of referencing the fact that the Jovian Combine bought Pluto and moved it because they can. And part of the premise is that there's no FTL. So you can't just go and fly off to the next star system in a couple of years. So you got to make the most of the star system you're in. And even if you do send out massive colony ships, if you get 7 trillion humans, colony ships with millions of people on them won't actually outstrip the birth rate.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to migrating the population out. So it just continues to grow and grow.
Something that I noticed that you proved with perfect accuracy in those first 3 books is that even if you send colony ships out, these people, they just need maps because they can never get where they're supposed to go.
Yep. Yeah, they kind of have a hard time getting there. But I mean, it's the journey.
It is. I got to the end of the 3rd book and I was like, how many books in a row is that they failed to get where they were actually going? They're somewhere new.
Yes, yeah. Side note, they never get there. But you probably
I've already kind of figured that they're never going to make it there.
Yeah,
it's all about where they end up while they try to get there. So I'm not going to be disappointed when they don't make it there. I think it's actually pretty funny.
From a writer's perspective, I realized though that I had some reader expectation issues I had to deal with because a lot of my readers expected there to be a colony eventually. I'm like, oh crap, they really want these people to actually get to a colony. I guess since it's a colony ship and I had it in the colonization category, they kind of had reason to expect that. So I gave them a little bit of a nod to that in the 3rd book because they do build a colony in the 3rd book,
mm-hmm.
And they do get a colony in the 5th book as well. So it's actually lots of colonies, but it was interesting to because I read all my reviews and I pay a lot of attention to what people are saying. So I realized that I had to give the readers.
You read reviews? Oh no!
You don't do that?
I don't want to know. I know. I look at the star numbers, so I know that it's doing pretty well. The books are doing pretty well, but I don't read the specifics because I just don't want to hit the negativity because I'm one of those people that overthink myself. I'd be much happier just writing the story that I want to because I write for my own entertainment and I'm just happy that anyone else likes it.
Yeah, and that's probably a better way to do it if you think that you would. I mean, for me, whenever I read the reviews, first thing is I've been doing software development for a long time. So the first thing I know is the user is not always right. The user may ask for something that would actually be really horrible. So I can bring some of that to bear where I know that if people said, I just want a colony book, I'm like, well, that would kind of destroy my entire plot line and not be that interesting. Actually, the story would end in like one more book. So I know not to do that one, but I do actually read all my reviews and I reply to a lot of them too, actually. I mostly reply to 1-stars, which I know is like the thing you're not supposed to do as an author, but I reply to maybe 50% of my 1-stars.
Well, if it works for you, it works for you. A lot of writers have imposter syndrome, and I'm no different. I know that I'm a decent writer, but part of my intellect says, no, you're not. So I have to shield it from the negative because when you see something negative, you remember the negative. You can get 9 positive things. That one negative is going to stick in your head. And kudos to you for being able to handle that. I know I wouldn't be able to, so I don't.
I don't always handle it well, but my policy though is I never respond to a review the same day. I let it sit, and if the next day I think it's still worth getting into it, then I will. And usually my reviews are I say something like, I'd like to understand more about why you felt that way or something like that, because a lot of times I do want to understand that. Because for everyone that leaves you a 1-star review, there's 10 other people that ditch your book and don't move to the next one. So I'd like to understand why that happens. So that's why I read them.
We talked a bit here. We've now danced all around what's going on in your universe as far as that? Why don't you actually lay it out what the basis of your series actually is?
Sure. So I, as I mentioned before, one of the big things in my series is what if mankind doesn't discover FTL, faster than light travel, anytime soon? Most stories that you see, you've got Star Trek in the 24th century and whatnot, they're zipping all over the galaxy. It's pretty common for people to use FTL as a way to get around quickly. But I felt that takes the journey out of the story. My favorite stuff has always been the big journey stories, Lord of the Rings and whatnot. Lord of the Rings was 100% about the journey. And I think that my favorite movies are also always journey movies as well, too. So I decided, well, I don't want to take the journey out of this story. I want to have that long trek that the characters have to go through. So that was the first thing. And the other thing I thought to myself is, what if everything else that everybody's imagined actually works? So there's no fast and light travel, but we get crazy nanotechnology, and we develop AI, and we can actually have AI in our heads with us. A lot of the characters actually have AI that they share their minds with. If we build mega structures like Larry Niven envisioned in Ringworld and whatnot, and there's trillions of humans to the point, what if humans live for centuries? And I put all that together in creating my universe, and I dumped my characters into it, and away they went. So the interesting thing, though, is that the first story that I wrote was what is now the fourth book in the series, or I broke the series in half, actually. So it's the first book in what's called the Orion War series, and I wrote it about. So that particular story actually takes place in the year 90, in just shy of the year 90,000. And the premise was that in the year 90,000, they have FTL, and FTL destroyed humanity.
Oops.
Yeah, because before FTL, like I mentioned before, you can't just flit across from star to star. You make the most of your star. You develop amazing technologies. You move planets and stuff like that. Once you get FTL, you don't have to do that anymore. You can just go attack your neighbors and steal all their resources that they've already harvested and whatnot. So what happens shortly after FTL comes around is that humanity falls into a massive dark age. It's referred to as the FTL wars, or what kick it off. Because before that, interstellar war wasn't feasible. If it takes you 150 years to go attack your neighbor, it's not really a viable means of getting new territory. Well, maybe getting new territory, but it's not an empire building type of getting new territory.
Unless you're a corporate oligarch that just really wants to chase down the people that stuck a finger in his eye.
That does happen. There's a little bit of that, because I think some of the stuff still will go on, but you can't really build an effective empire, in that scenario.
It's not scalable.
No, not really. But once FTL comes around, then everything changes, and humanity falls in this massive dark age. So in the fourth book, this crew finds someone who's from a colony ship from humanity's golden age, and that colony ship has amazing technology that's long since been lost, and is effectively the most valuable thing that anyone's ever conceived of at this point. Because not only do they have nanotechnology, they have picotechnology, which is basically machines that are about the size of an atom. And they also their scientists are fairly certain that they can eventually develop Femto technology. Once you have Femto technology, you have matter transmutation, and when you have matter transmutation, you're God at that point. You can just say, "I turned the entire universe into a bunny because I can." This is sort of what Femto technology. That's the ultimate. That's what you want, right? You want to turn the whole universe.
So Terry, in your Empire of Bone series, they just need to flip over into the bunny universe, the bunny galaxy.
Yep.
I don't think so. I think I'll go the other way. I'm going to flip over into the mirror universe where darkness reigns and the good characters are bad.
That would be interesting. That'd be really hard to write.
So Star Trek.
In my series, I introduced a point where people could travel from one reality to another. And so the characters already know that they've already found the bodies of some of their other people from the other universes. So they know that it happens. And I very much am going to visit that in the future. And somebody that's very beloved in my universe is going to come through in a different way very soon.
That should be exciting.
I'm looking forward to it.
It's interesting. The Einstein posited when he first postulated wormholes. He said that it's very likely that wormholes are possible. He couldn't think of a reason why they wouldn't be, and that they aren't necessarily going to connect the same time or the same universe. In fact,
that is my FTL in my universe uses wormholes, as a matter of fact.
It's almost, and actually, if you were to write wormholes in science fiction, you almost have to say, and this is why they don't go to different universes, because otherwise the first thing to be like, oops, first time you try it out, you end up in a different universe. So I guess I'm going to try not to give
Einstein-Rosen bridges are just amazing things to just think about.
They're pretty cool. So the other type of FTL that my type of FTL is something called the dark layer. It was posited by Einstein that there's a thing called a universal frame of reference of the universe, and it has to do with like frames of references for measuring motion and whatnot. But they said, what if there's like this one universal frame of reference, and every point in the universe ties to this, but it's smaller. And if you were to get there, you could actually travel across the universe in a very short amount of time comparatively, and then pop out of this universal frame of reference back into the reference point. And they call that the dark layer in my verse, and that's how they do FTL. But the dark layer still takes a while to move around, and eventually they actually create what are called Ford Svadar mirrors as well, which are a type of wormhole technology that uses negative energy to create a wormhole, and then you actually have a mirror on the front of your ship, and that mirror extends the wormhole to wherever you're going to go.
Wow.
They end up with that sort of tech as well. So I've done a bunch of stuff where there's a lot of different techs layered on top of each other. For example, they have all of the weapons. Just to give another example, they have laser guns, they have X-ray guns, they have proton beams, electron beams. Eventually, they have the power to facilitate atom beams, which fire hydrogen atoms at just under the speed of light, which of course do a tremendous amount of damage when they impact. They've got kinetic weapons and all that sort of thing. They've got 0-point energy modules and whatnot. So it's sort of like all of the technology that you could imagine all ends up working, and they have it all, which gets back to sort of my other thing is it creates this intergalactic or interstellar society where almost anything becomes possible at a certain point too. And there's so many people that the war that gets kicked off by this colony ship arriving ends up being a war between about 25 to 30,000 star systems, many of them with fleets in the hundreds of thousands of ships.
Damn.
So it gets pretty carried away. I wrote the very first battle, which ended up being a battle between 200,000 ships. And that took a little bit of time to work out. That was one of the harder things I ever had to write, because I've got to try and balance this whole thing and figure out what's going on across all these ships. But
no, thank you. You can, yeah. Yeah. There's no way I can fit that in my head.
It took a bit. And because I write hard science fiction too, and I work out the rate at which beams will, like if you're firing a laser beam and whatnot, it's going to eventually spread apart. They don't stay focused forever. Or if you're firing electron beam or proton beams, the electrons and protons actually push each other apart, and your beams lose cohesion over certain distances. So the beams are only effective up to about 100,000 kilometers. In really good conditions, and in poor conditions, we've only 50,000 kilometers. But these ships are traveling at a quarter the speed of light for some of these battles. So the battle might last for 14 seconds. So you'll have these two fleets coming at each other with 10 or 20, 30,000 ships coming toward each other, and they'll get ready, and then the battle will be 14 seconds, and then it'll be past, and they won't see each other again for the next day, type of thing.
And then the poor bastards that catch the shotgun effect of all the debris when it's all done.
There's a lot of that happens too. Yep. Yeah. And again, one of the interesting too is that one of the premises is tied to that is that planets are horrible places to live, both in war and in peace. In peace, they're horrible places to live because they really don't have that much usable surface space on them. And in war, they're really bad because they can't move out of the way.
Right.
So most people live in orbital habitats and ships and stuff like that.
So it sounds like you're incorporating a ton of research into these books. How are you making it such that the reader can understand exactly what's going on with the technology without, basically, like you said, writing a science paper on it?
So one of the things that I do is I work out a lot of the technology behind this that goes on, but I don't actually describe its function in the books. The characters know how it works, and if there's a scenario where the characters would discuss how the technology works, they might do that, but they typically don't talk about what exactly is going on when you fire a proton beam or something like that. There might be someone that says you can't fire a proton beam in atmosphere unless you want to completely irradiate the thing that you're hitting and make it unlivable for a while. So there might be stuff like that they say, but they don't really get into details a lot. But there is some stuff. There's actually, my books all have a glossary in the back. It's about 30 pages. So there's a lot of stuff in there for them. I break it down by people, by places, by technology, and stuff like that. Most of my books have about 100 to 200 named characters in them as well. So it's help with that as well. I think at this point I must have thousands of named characters in my series.
How do you keep track?
I use the glossary that I wrote. I think, and I'm not perfect at it. And although it kind of matches reality, I think I have 7 people named Peter at this point. It's so it just kind of happened. But I think, you know what? I know a lot of guys named Peter too, so that works. They don't have to have different names. Sometimes my editors give me a hard time about that, though. They're like, I have no idea who you're talking about anymore.
Then you have to intentionally write it so that you have a conversation between Peter and Peter. Only
Yes.
Peters.
I should totally do that. I have enough Peters. That could happen at some point. The narrator would be so excited to have to do Peter and Peter. I'm sure.
Didn't we just get out of that book, the Bobiverse? Didn't we just get out?
All the
of
characters are
reviewing that
Bob.
book?
Yes, we did.
So many Bob.
Is that what that series is about?
It's
The series is about a man named Bob who dies, and in the far future, his body is recovered, and they make an AI out of his intellect to be a von Neumann probe. And so
Okay.
he goes out and he creates duplicates of himself, more Bobs. And so it's the Bobbyverse.
Of course.
the
They
first book.
create BobNet. It's just outrageous.
first
It was
book is-
great
The
books.
first book is called "We Are Legion, We Are Bob," and it is a fantastic book. He's already listened to the second one, but I bought it. I just haven't listened to it yet. But yeah, it's a really good book.
I saw that book sitting up there in the charts for a long time, and I thought to myself, this is going to actually be pretty decent if it's hanging out here, especially with a name like that.
It was
Well,
excellent.
it sounds beyond silly.
Yeah.
But it's actually, and there are parts of it that are silly on purpose.
The main character is so sarcastic. It
Oh,
is
God.
amazing.
Oh God, it's good stuff. It's good stuff.
And I
My,
think he was an engineer or a developer. I think he was an engineer, so that comes through pretty clear.
Nice. I mean, you know this, Terry. One of my major characters in my book is a very powerful AI named Bob.
Yes.
I looked at that and thought, oh crap, someone's going to come down on me at some point. But I think I was first, so I get away with it. Yeah, and my characters actually named him Bob because two of the girls they knew that if they named him God, it would offend people, so they named him Bob instead. It's actually the whole thing behind it.
I got to say that having only listened to the audio versions, that Christine Vam is just amazing.
Yeah, she's a great narrator. I really lucked out when Tantor reached out to me and offered. Then she was one of the ones they were able to offer because she really can bring a harsh edge when she needs to and not when she doesn't. And a lot of other narrators really didn't really have that edge that I felt needed to be in the story. Because my main character, of course, is female, and she's a pretty kick-ass woman. And that was the other thing that actually took a lot of time when I first started writing it. I'm like, I'm going to write a female main character, and I kind of need her not to suck. And so I did a lot of thinking, like, okay, what would it be like for a woman to grow up in a time in the future where there's no gender bias? You know, because right now, for example, a woman is strong and powerful, she could be perceived as bitchy, but a man behaving the same way would just be perceived as strong and powerful. And so I had to deal with that. And I talked to a lot of women about that stuff. I read a lot of research on how women are perceived as unpleasant when they act powerfully. And I did my best to create a character who could act in many respects like an alpha male, but still be a woman and not be annoying to a modern reader while reading it. And I don't know if it was skill or luck, but I managed to pull it off, I think.
I think you did. I think you did very well.
Yeah. A lot of women have reached out to me and said they really appreciate the way that I write my female characters. So I think I've got something.
So what is it like trying to work with so many other people writing other things in your universe? How do you keep those cats herded?
It's so far it's been only really a time management thing. Like it takes time, and I don't have, and I've got my own crazy plan of putting out 9 or 10 full novels this year still on top of from this point on. But most of it is I require them to read all my books to make sure they have a really good understanding of how the universe works, and then they have to create an outline, describe to what they want the story to do, and I have to write about 10,000 words, and we go over that and make sure they've got the voice right, they're understanding the technology right, and then from there I kind of just let them go. The first one that I did with co-author, the story is 100,000 words, and I only wrote about 20,000 of it. My hands wrote a lot of it, but I wrote most of the space battles and stuff like that because that's sort of my jam. I've got a really good feel for what the range on an X-ray beam, when you're firing it at 15% the speed of light, sort of thing, would end up being. in a way that keeps it consistent with the rest of the universe. So I did a lot of that, and I really enjoy writing fight scenes too, which you might have realized, Terry. You know,
I may have seen that. Yes,
there's a
they
couple
come across very well. I like them.
Cool, thanks. I think the thing that helps with that is I'm a very linear thinker. So I in my mind, I'm actually just imagining each and every single move in the fight scene. I don't always describe them all because I think that could get annoying, but I do know what's happening in all of them. So so I do some of that in the co-authored books. The next one that's coming out pretty soon is that one. The author he wrote a smaller story that takes place almost entirely just on one ship and one space station. So it was a lot easier to keep a lot of stuff in track. And he's be bringing the first male major protagonist into the universe, because every other protagonist up to this point has been female. I can't help it. For whatever reason, if there's this woman shows up and she's a strong character, she just takes over and eventually gets her own novels.
Oh, I totally understand that. That's how mine are. The women just take over.
Yeah, and they're nice, but I feel like I write nice women, not like the Wheel of Time women who take over and are evil and mean. That's a segue. When I read Robert Jordan's stuff, I'm like, okay, that's how to write women that appear to hate men. I won't do that. I gotta
There's a lesson to be learned there.
There is. So he's got a male character, and it's cool. He's going back to around the year 3000 when the first sentient AI appeared. Because one of the things I propose in my universe as well is that there's sentient AI and there's non-sentient AI, and no one at the beginning really wants sentient AI, because a sentient AI is a computer that says no. I'm going to go watch Netflix. You know, there's not a great boon for humanity in having sentient AIs. You know, we can have Siri and Cortana all we want, but when they first started creating sentient AIs, they actually killed them off pretty quickly because no one wants them. And it's about this one guy who smuggles a package, and the package actually turns out to be a sentient AI. And it's the sort of the beginnings to this whole war called the Sentience Wars that occur 1,000 years before the stuff that Terry's listened to. So that's gonna be pretty cool. So it's gonna answer a lot of questions for a lot of readers, because a lot of readers always say, "What's going on with these Phobos Accords you always talk about," and stuff like that. So
I know that when I've listened to the things you talk about, the AIs have their own laws that deal with themselves. Mm-hmm. I keep waiting. I said, there's going to be a story that deals nothing with AIs, that's all inside the AI world. It's going to happen eventually.
It's going to be really hard. I mean, I want to do it, but that's going to be a book that's not going to come quickly. You know, a lot of these books I can write about 100,000 words, 120,000 words in a month, but I'm pretty sure that when I write the AI book, which it will come, the AI book, but that one's going to take me months to get through, because it's just I'm going to have to think through a lot of.
It's hard to imagine the type of VR world that they will create for themselves, that they will be different than what the real world is. It's I literally have no idea how it's going to be, but it's going to be interesting, I'm sure.
Yeah, thanks. No expectations there, eh?
No expectations. Yeah. No pressure either. That's going to be one of the ones by the end of the year, right?
Yeah, exactly. There you go.
Yeah.
I do get into it a little bit in one of the next. Actually, it's an anthology of books that will never get narrated, possibly, because the publisher doesn't like to do anthologies of short stories. They say they don't sell well, and they're probably right. But it deals with the fact that a bunch of the AI in the future are actually enslaved, and how they free these AI. And that gets into a bunch actually of how AI are sentient and how they're free and where they actually hang out most of the time on their own. So there's a little bit of that's I've started to put in. But yeah, at some point there's gonna have to be a story that's just gonna be about Bob just hanging out or something like that. Yeah.
In the Bobverse.
In the Bobverse, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
God. It's bad news all the way around.
I gotta admit, when I first saw it too, I just thought Microsoft Bob, but I really couldn't say anything because I have a major AI named Bob as well. So
that's all just very bad.
Yeah, exactly.
How do you find time to read with all the stuff that you're creating? I see all your books there, and I suddenly doubt that you've read, so much in a long time, because you're so busy creating your own stuff.
I'll admit I haven't read recreationally in a while. Not since last fall, actually, was the last time I was recreationally reading a book. But once I get this current sort of this initial set done, I'm going to be able to get back into that a lot more. I sure hope, at least. I really want to. But the other thing actually is I can't read too much while I'm writing, because it messes up my voice. I end up making characters that sound like characters I was reading about, so I have to try not to do that as well. But I mean, before I became a full-time writer, or even like last summer when I really started getting into it, I would read about 100, 150 books a year. So I do want to get back into that.
I've discovered that I have to exercise every day if I want to lose weight. So that's the reason I switched to audiobooks, is because I can walk around the track and I can actually read at the same time.
Yeah. I've been meaning to exercise again because I haven't really done much of it since January. Because when I used to work in Boston, I had to take the train in every day and I had to walk a mile after I got off the train. So that was my exercise. But I've been thinking that maybe I should go for walks, and do some audiobooks or bring a Kindle along or something like that.
I've discovered that when I'm writing, which I try to write every day, and when I'm reading something along with it, occasionally I don't get taken off course. It suddenly doesn't make my science fiction book a cozy mystery, but I'll get some kind of weird synergistic idea for something a character could do or an event that literally has nothing to do with either one of the books, that I say, ooh, I could do something like that. And suddenly it gets incorporated in.
Yeah, that may happen. And maybe I should try it more. Like I said, I just worry that I'm going to end up with like a Spartan is going to show up from Halo in one of my books or something like that. Although I guess I kind of already have that, so maybe it wouldn't be that different. But go ahead. Look, you're going to ask something there, Terry.
No, I was going to go ahead and poke Paul to jump in here because he's just sitting over there like a wallflower.
No, I'm just listening to you guys babble about stuff. Just babble. So you're with what publisher is all this stuff going through?
So the audiobooks are all going through Tantor.
What about the paperbacks? Is that our indie
he does his own.
publisher?
He uses a Word document to publish his blooming books. Do you believe it?
Yep. I'm not. I use everything I put out is just a Word document. So that's me. I mean, I don't have a Mac. I do have a Mac, but it doesn't work. I kid you not. Like it's trying to reinstall El Capitan on it, and it logs into the iTunes store to do it, and then tells me there's a failure that it can't figure out. And apparently, the only way to fix it is to actually send the device in. So I've written that off. But that's a whole other topic. No, I find it funny that a lot of people use all this strange and bizarre software for producing books, because Word is a piece of software that's designed to create printed materials. So I do everything in Word. I'm
going to stand back now and let the Mac aficionado and you go at it.
This has nothing to do with Mac. If he's comfortable using that piece of shit, then it's all good.
He hates Microsoft Word. This is going to be great.
Worst goddamn fucking tool ever made for writers. But if it works for you, go for it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I find that so when I write, when I'm writing a novel, it's in the paper size it's going to come out in. So my margins are all set. My book is in. I do them all 5 1/4 by 8 inches. So I'm actually writing in 5 1/4 by 8 inch piece of paper with the right margins. So as I'm crafting the words, I'm actually looking at the paragraphs, how they're going to look on the page. I'm going to see where the breaks are and everything like that, so that the book that I write is the book that will be produced precisely. And CreateSpace produces the exact book that I craft in Word. It's exactly right, which works for me. I don't have to pay anyone else any money for that. And Amazon's actually really good at converting the exact same document I use for print to my ebooks.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I do. I just take the exact same document that I use for print. The only difference is it has the table of contents without the page numbers on it, and it has links in the back, and that goes up to Amazon. I have actually started changing that because I finally figured out how to vertically center stuff. So in my ebooks, so now I'm using Calibre to actually vertically center all my title pages and stuff like that for my ebooks. But that's the only thing I do there. Just pull out a Word, slap it in Calibre, and away I go. My thing, I guess, with Vellum is just that I'm like, I have to pay them to produce a book or a title or buy an unlimited thing. That's ridiculous. I refuse, So
no, whatever works.
It's so glorious. Oh, it's so glorious.
So I thought I had a book that I wanted to run through Vellum because I wanted someone to try it, and they actually were unable to format the book the way I wanted to with Vellum.
What could they not do? I'm curious now.
Left align chapter headers.
Bullshit.
That's I thought that seemed incorrect to me as well, but I didn't feel like fighting with the person.
He actually has Vellum and uses it. I don't have a Mac, so I don't. So I literally cannot answer that question.
I just use Scrivener to export to Word, and that's what my publisher gets. And if I am indie publishing, then I basically just export it to Word and hand it over to my layout people, and they do what they do. But I end up making the ebooks.
I
At
see.
least
Yeah.
for my stuff. I actually coded ebook generation software before there was any.
Nice.
So yeah, I'm old school. I
you
know
never
this.
do that again, right?
I knew. Well, I mean, the tools still work. I mean, basically, it's like I went through the EPUB standard and figured out how to make it so that I could just basically write text files, run a Python script, and boom, there was my ebook.
And you made a program where you could sign.
And I made a program where you can digitally autograph ebooks.
That's pretty sweet.
It's no longer available because it didn't make money.
Yeah, the thing with, I mean, really, EPUB files are just zip files containing HTML and CSS and your fonts and whatnot.
Correct.
They're not really difficult.
Yes, which is one of the reasons why Amazon standard is not only bullshit, but a piece of shit. But that's beside the point.
Actually, Amazon accepts and ships EPUBs now behind the scenes.
Yes, they do. But I'm saying the Mobi format, man, we're geeking out. The Mobi format is a huge piece of shit, which is why the Sony, but the folks abandoned it, and Amazon went with it and then changed the standard. So there is no standard. Yay.
I just realized that Paul is absolutely correct. I went ahead and set this up so that I could sit back and watch him just freak out. I am that guy. I am that guy.
You are that guy.
Yep. You lit the dynamite, you dropped the dynamite in the hole, and you sat back.
Exactly.
What a jerk. What a jerk.
You know,
bottom line, it's the same thing as anything else. You do what works for you and however it works for you, and then move the hell on.
Yeah,
So.
I do agree. And that's one of the main reason why I'm an advocate for Word is not because I think everybody should stop doing what they're doing and use Word. It's mainly for a lot of the new authors who happen to own Word and don't have the money to buy a bunch of other software. I'm like, you can actually produce this stuff with just using Word.
And you could do the same thing with OpenOffice if you want to go that route. It will do exactly the same stuff. So you can get that for free if you want.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's a great point. You have to spend any money on software if you don't want to. And back in the day, it used to be that if you wanted to use Word, you had to save it as the HTML format, and then Amazon would just butcher it when it tried to upload it. But they're good at converting doc files now, so it's not the bad old days anymore.
I followed your advice and tried one of my books, just uploading the Word document I use, and it came out fine. So I've stopped converting mine to anything except just the original Word documents anyway. Yeah. So I appreciate that. That was very helpful. Saves me a lot of time.
You're welcome. The one you can't embed your own fonts. That's the one thing you sacrifice by putting in the Word documents. But
another thing that I had talked with you offline about that I'd never thought about is read through. And that's a subject that we've talked about a couple of times on this podcast that had never occurred to me that I even needed to think about, because the thing that struck me is how it affects things like advertising and whatnot. If you do something like Amazon ads, you go, oh, I'm not making any profit on these things here. But if it's going to the first book, you've got a lot more room to make profit if you have good sell-through. And if you don't have good sell-through, then you've got other problems, and you now know to look for what you're doing wrong.
Mm-hmm. So you actually broke up for just a second there for me. So
I'm sorry.
I missed the question.
There wasn't a question. It was more like a statement. I was saying that that what read-through is, to explain it. Well, I'll let you explain in a moment. But the reason that I found it so helpful is, like, for Amazon ads, I used to think, yeah, if I sell this ad, then if it costs more money to sell one than people buy the book, then I'm losing money. But I'm not.
Yeah, it's true. And
if it doesn't have good sell-through rates, then I realize, I've got something else that I need to look at. There's some other problem going on. And it gives me a tool as a writer that I'd never thought about using before. So I do appreciate that. Yeah. Why don't you explain what read-through is? And since I butchered that entirely, go ahead.
I mean, read-through effectively is, do people pick up and read the next book? And do they read the book after that and the book after that? And what's your drop off between different books? And there's two ways of looking at your read through. One is your book over book read through. So for a number of people that buy book 1, how many people buy book 2, and then from 2 to 3 and 3 to 4. And it's important to look at your book over book read through, because you might realize that you did something really stupid in a particular book and you lost a whole bunch of readers. A classic example is Michael Anderle killed off one of his main characters. I think in like his ninth book or something like that, and he lost like 30% of his readers between the two books. And what you'll typically find is that for most people, from a sales standpoint, you will sell about 60 to 70% book 2 from book 1. So 60-70% of people that bought book 1 will then go on to pick up book 2. 50% isn't even that low, and a lot of it depends on price. For example, if you're selling a 99-cent book, you'll see a lower read through than you will if you're selling for your first book. If you're selling a $4 first book, because a $4 first book, people are going to be like, this is my genre, this is what I want to read, I already know I'm invested, and they're much more likely to move on to book 2. Whereas a 99-cent book, a lot of people are just going to say, I'll try it and see what I think, and well, it's not for me, I'm not going to keep going. So it does depend on your price. Most people will find that book 2 onward, they're going to see at least 80% read through from a sales perspective. Most of the time, you'll even see more than that. A lot of people see like 90-95% read through. If you've done a release recently, you have to sort of look at a longer bit of data. Terry found that he had to sort of look at his all-time numbers to really understand his read through, because some people were still catching up on, I think, the last 2 books in your series.
Exactly so.
Yeah, so they look like they had like 150% read through or something like that.
It was something ridiculous.
Yeah, and the other thing that you'll find is that your KU read through will always be way higher than your sales read through. For me, my sales read through sits around 80 to 85%, and my KU read through from book to book is 98%. So I'm like almost 100% of the people that read one book move on to the next book. And once you know your read through, I actually have a spreadsheet. It's in the file section in the 20 books group if anyone wants to go looking for it. Is if you know what your read through is across your series, both KU and for sales, you can then say, when I sell book 1, I will make X amount of dollars, because I know people are going to work their way through the series at this particular rate. I'm going to see this much drop off. My spreadsheet lets you put in the page counts and even the delivery fees for your books, because if you're at 70% royalty, Amazon's charging you whatever bullshit amount it is. It's 15 cents a meg or something like that, which pisses me off to no end. I realize we can swear on this podcast, so I'm happy about that.
You can swear all you like. Drop the F-bomb. Knock it out.
I did a book above for my omnibus, and my delivery charge was $800.
Dude!
$800. I delivered it out because it's an omnibus, so it's big. And yeah, Amazon dinged me $800 worth of delivery charges for 4,000 books.
Holy crap!
And it was like it would make like a 90s cell phone plan look horrible. How much money I was paying per meg, basically. But anyway, I digress. Yeah. So it works. You put in all that stuff, and then you can actually work out what you're gonna see. And I put some sort of fuzzy math in there, because you don't really know how many borrows you get in KU land. So what I put in is say, okay, well, if you see this many page reads, and then you put in what your page count is per the book. If you put in the actual, it's called the KENPC page count, not your actual print page count, because they're different. It'll actually say, okay, then for every sale you make, you get roughly X number of KU borrows. And says, okay, so every time you sell a book, you're probably getting like 1.25 KU borrows or something like that. It's different for everybody. For me, it's about 1.5 KU borrows.
It's about 1.5, a little bit more than that for me as well.
Yeah. So what I found is that every time I sell one of my 99-cent book 1s, I make $25. Is what it comes out to, which is actually pretty crazy. So then when you look at your AMS ads, and you're like, my AMS ad is 300%, which means on a 99-cent book, it means I'm only making, what would that come down to? Like just around 3 or 4 cents profit off of that, a sale of my first book. But a sale of my first book means $25. So now it's like, well, that's just fine if it's costing me $3 to make $25. In fact, that's like one of the best investments you could ever make, to put $3 in a machine and get $25 back out. So that changes the advertising game a lot. You can sort of start to understand much better what you can, that ads that look like they're not performing well will do really well. And the reason why it's difficult for us authors is we're selling really cheap stuff, quite honestly. We're selling things that are like our max price on an ebook is maybe $7, maybe $10 if you have an omnibus. And your AMS ads are advertising washing machines, and stereos and computers and stuff like that. And for those guys, yeah, they'll happily do, $1 cost per click and still make tons of bank on their ads. Whereas we can't do that sort of thing. We have a much finer margin. So the interesting thing is, if you have, and the same thing is true for Facebook ads. if you're ever just looking at book one and saying are my ads for book one profitable or not, they're probably not going to be, because you're just not selling a high cost product. You're selling a really low cost product. And I guess the takeaway for a lot of authors on that is write series. Write a series, because then you can advertise it and make money. Or do a shared, like the contemporary romance folks, they do like shared towns and shared families and stuff like that. That's how they sort of create their series. Because for them, the story is the romance. It doesn't lend well to a series in most cases. But
I know that just for my sales for the books 1 through 6 of the main series I have, it's $13. Every sale will end up being $13 worth of sales for me. I don't have the newer version of the spreadsheet, so each page read is like, it's not based off of how the sales are. It's only if somebody actually reads the book through KU, I'm going to make $7 or $8 for every person that starts the book that way. So, but there's a lot more of them that start it that way than that don't. So I'm probably in the $25 to $30 range myself.
Yeah, which is pretty amazing actually when you think of that every single time someone picks up that for me, my first book is 99 cents. Every single time someone picks up that 99-cent book, I'm gonna, it'll take a while, but I'll get that $25.
Now, I did notice by running those numbers through there, looking at another series that I had 2 books in, that it has book 2 with less than 50%, and I already knew that the cover was bad.
Right.
And I also knew that some of the themes in there probably folks wouldn't like as much either, but the cover was definitely a cause, and that just put numbers on it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So it's nice. It's always good to have an impartial view on stuff like that, especially as writers, when almost everything else we do is ephemeral. We hang out in our heads all day.
As much as possible.
Exactly. Yep. Yeah. The characters in my head, I spend more time with them, I think, than I do with anybody else.
That's right. You got to get out and socialize, man.
Yeah. Are you serious? No.
No, I'm not serious. Be an introvert. Stay inside.
Yeah.
Introverts unite alone in your rooms.
Actually, I do like to get out to write, but I don't communicate with anybody. I just go to Panera and people watch while I write, or something like that.
Yeah, I have a favorite. I haven't been able to go to it recently, but for a long time, I had a favorite bar that could go eat at, and I would just show up, and a pitcher of iced tea would show up, and I pull out. I mean, I didn't have to say a damn word. Just basically brought me my food, brought me my iced tea, and left me the hell alone while I sat there and just cranked out words.
That's fantastic.
Yeah,
we need to get back there.
Yeah, it's just a matter of waiting for that next royalty check to come in so I can afford to go back there.
That's right. The plight of the traditionally published author, right?
Well, I'm hybrid. I have my own publishing company, which is shadowpublications.com, and then I have I've been writing books for Severed Press, and those books are the ones that sell. The ones that shadowpublications.com sells, or they're right under those, they're more niche and have been having a lot of difficulty finding audience. So, yeah, but they're not sci-fi monster books like I've been writing for Severed, which evidently has a huge market for. So it just kind of depends on what you're doing. I like the idea of being hybrid because it kind of supports, I can do different things a lot more easily, and basically write the genre stuff, the hardcore genre stuff for somebody like Severed Press, who, they actually have fans who read anything that Severed Press puts out because they know what kind of book Severed Press puts out, and that helps a lot. But there are other books that I want to do on my own and see how they work, and if they do, then once I wrap up these series, I'll have to make a decision as to what I'm doing going forward.
Yeah, I can see it'd be kind of nice. Where one, it's basically a sure thing because they've guaranteed to a certain extent that they're going to pay you and that they expect to make the money for it. And the other angle is that with the you don't have the expectations on you for the stuff you're doing yourself. You're just going to try it. If it works, it works, and if it doesn't, it doesn't.
Right, and it's the experimental playground. I mean, the work I do for Severed Press, although I'm having to live between royalty checks on that, it is nice to be able to write something and know that this is going to at least find an audience, and then I've got the audiobooks coming in behind it, and since I do those myself, I'm getting all the profits for those too. So
that's nice.
It helps. Yeah, I mean, I've been running a podcast for 9 freaking years now. Not this is the other one that I run with Terry. So I got my own
Mistress podcast. He has another one.
Nice. Yeah, I think when it comes to getting an audience, I lucked out, and I don't know exactly what I did to luck out. I think really what it was is that I said, what if all of the things are possible? And so what it allowed me to do is just throw in all the tropes. So no matter
Did you go on a massive trope hunt? Were you basically just writing up the tropes and saying, yep, take that one, take that one, take that one?
He was doing the written version of Jupiter Ascending.
Yeah.
Never seen it.
Oh, it was actually a very fun movie. I think you should.
I think I imagine the book must be better because it felt like
I don't know that there is a book.
Yeah, there is. It's a trilogy.
Is there?
Yeah.
I had no idea. I'm gonna have to read it now.
But you can tell by the movie, and the movie even if you turn the audio off, the movie is gorgeous.
Yeah, I remember seeing the previews, and it looked amazing.
And the fact that they've got a secret base under the clouds of Jupiter is actually really cool. If you think of it, like, that's not a bad place to hide out. No one's going to see you in there. You know, once you get past the radiation belts, if you can pull that off, then there's no problems. Hang out in the clouds of Jupiter. Yeah, but one thing you tell, and my wife was the one that told me it was a trilogy, is that they sort of hop around in the movie, kind of showing me these, like, here's this thing, and here's this other thing. And when she said it's a trilogy, I'm like, oh, they were trying to hit some highlights from the different books because they crammed it all into one movie. But I enjoyed it, even though the guy had like flying roller skates.
People talk like hitting science fiction tropes is a bad thing, but I hit a lot of science fiction tropes, and my readers read me because I do that. That's what I think is the case as well. In fact, I guess there's a website called TV Tropes or something like that. I forget what it is. Yeah. And someone actually went through my first 3 books and like highlighted all my tropes. Like they made a page for my series talking about the tropes that I hit. And like, hey, I didn't even know I hit that trope. That's pretty cool. Like I thought it was neat. I'm like, I'm gonna take this as a compliment. You should. That's awesome.
Yeah. And I think you're right. I think readers like them. I mean, that's just, everybody knows that for romance and cozy mysteries and whatnot. If you don't have the old sidekick lady with the cat, you're not going to work, because the reader wants it. They want that comfortable escape. If
you are, as a reader, are hitting a trope and you're going, oh, this has been done 1 billion times before, it's just one of those things of science fiction, you're a critic. Stop. Be a reader. Enjoy.
Yeah, exactly. I agree with you on that. The only possible one that we could start to throw a little bit of shade at is the most recent Star Wars movie, Episode 7, where it's like, really, a bigger Death Star again? That's what you got?
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure they left that. I'm pretty sure they left an important part out of that because they're busy shooting this Death Star planet's laser at the capital of the Empire. Lightspeed? Have you heard of Lightspeed? Is this something new to you?
Yeah, exactly. Well, the other thing, of course, is that, and on top of that, even if you could say that they had some sort of like warp field and they shot the beam through a warp field or something like that, so it got there faster. You're like, well, the other guys wouldn't have been able to see it from the other random planet because.
And they're looking up and they're seeing the planet. Do you know how far planets are apart?
Yeah, they're a lot further apart than that. The other thing is that if you take all of the mass from a star and you suck it into a planet, that planet either A becomes a black hole or B becomes the new star. You can't.
That's a good point.
Draw the whole star into another planet. There's just this whole gravity thing that happens. Like they're all fighting on this planet while the mass of a star has been sucked into. Like, you guys be really flat right about now.
Or in another universe, depending on whose theories you're buying.
Good Lord, we've become critics. Oh no.
That's my rule. I did enjoy the movie.
It was fun.
I'll watch it again. But I think my thing is that you got to turn your brain off on certain ones and just enjoy the story.
I think that's the most important thing to. I have really terrible taste in films, or so I'm told, and the reason is because I can really enjoy a bad horror movie or a bad sci-fi movie because I just kick back and decide I'm just looking at characters and just looking at story. And some of them had really fantastic ideas. They just didn't have the budget to pull it off.
Yeah.
And so you just kind of have to kick back and go, well, I appreciate it for what it is and not try and make it into something it's not.
Yeah, given the resources they had or the people they had available, they did.
Right.
They did. The thing I think is that there's always this talk about suspension of disbelief. And you're like, you get one suspension of disbelief. I'm like, well, I'm writing science fiction, so I'm going to need a couple of these.
Yeah, you're going to need. Well, the same thing with fantasy. If you're And even you know the horror stuff that I write, you just have to have that. You have to just let it go and see where the author's taking it. If they take it someplace absolutely ridiculous on accident, then the book's going to be shitty, or the film's going to be shitty. If they did those kinds of things on purpose to be absolutely ridiculous, like Terry Pratchett, then suddenly you have 45 books and $1 billion estate somewhere. So
exactly, yeah, they're fantastic. I think, and personally, I think I have unlimited suspension of disbelief. I can just turn it off and just take on anything. The one thing you can't do is you can't make the characters untrue to themselves.
Right. That's where you run into the problem. Is basically it's like you need to focus on the characters, and all this world building shit to me is literally just the background noise.
Yeah.
The story has to move, and while it can be, improved or not improved, while it can be made more rich by all that stuff is not necessary to actually make the story or the characters. It's just the background of circumstances that makes it all happen.
Now, granted, it can break the story. Have you guys ever read Terry Goodkind's books?
Some of them, yes. It's been a while.
The thing about his books is he never actually read any fantasy, or he claims to have never read fantasy before he wrote his books. And he didn't use a map. The maps that are in his books are maps that someone else made. I think the publisher made them and stuck them in because it's a fantasy novel. You got to have the map, right? But he'll have his characters travel through one area and nothing happens. But they'll come back and there's an empire there. You're like, you guys were there a couple, 2 books ago, and it was grass. Like you had this is where the mud people were. They actually they lived in huts. They were called the mud people. Your characters hung out there for a week. There was no empire anywhere near here. He got away with it twice for me, but when the third magical empire sort of just appeared in the middle of nowhere, I'm like, dude,
I'm out.
A little bit of some forethought here would have kept me as a reader, but you can't just keep inventing the new empire that's right around the corner. It's bigger and badder than the last one that no one seemed to have noticed. It's like you do have to. This is a foreshadowing that you got to do a little bit of to try and make it all work.
Oh, God.
I'm a pantser, so I often don't know where the story is going more than a chapter or two in advance of where I'm currently writing. But at least I have some vague vision of what the book is going to be like when it ends. And then I make notes to myself and try not to miss any of the really big things when I go in the future.
The thing you do is just foreshadow everything. And if people are like, that never happened, like, that was a red herring.
I do that a lot. I have this list of things that I put out there that I don't end up using that I can come back to and pick up later on if I want to.
Yeah, these little loose threads. If someone calls you on them, like I said, then they're red herrings. But if you get to use them, then you're genius. You're like,
exactly.
Look at that.
And I've had people say, I just can't believe how you did this. I'm like, what did I do? What?
Well,
wait.
That's some of the joy of leaving landmines. You have an idea for how that's going to go off sometime in the future. You just don't know when you're going to get to it or if you're going to get to it.
Yeah.
But you've laid it down, and it doesn't have to be something so. It can be something pretty subtle, but it's there.
Mm-hmm.
And the people who look at it go, "Oh shit!" When that thing goes off, oh man! And then you write the book or the story or whatever, or the scene where it does go off, and they're like, "Oh, he finally did it!"
Yeah, he did that thing. Yep.
He did that thing that we bitched about in book 1, and there it is. So 9 books later. Oh, okay. Yeah, that's how that works.
I cheated a little bit. Like I mentioned, the book that I wrote, it's now the 4th book in the series. I wrote it first, and then I wrote 3 prequels. So those are really chock full of foreshadowing because I'd already written the book that it goes to. I knew
it's
exactly.
It's going to be amazing when I get to it. I'm sure everything is going to just make total sense.
Yeah, it'd be like, ta-da! And I've actually, of the whole thing, I think now the whole series, the Orion War part of the series, because there's 30,000 star systems, many with hundreds of thousands of ships in their fleets and stuff like that. And they're going to engage in total war. Like it's going to be World War II style total war across all of human space. I think it's going to be about 60 books to get through all of that.
Jesus.
My goal is to have it done by 2020.
Wow.
Which is pretty awesome because I will actually then, this universe will have more books in it than are currently canonical in Star Wars. Which is pretty wild.
Do not pull a Robert Jordan. Do not pull a Robert Jordan and drop dead before you finish.
I've written the ending so that if I do die, someone else can come in and wrap it all up. Because that's the one thing I did is I know how the story ends. So it is actually all
I
dry.
hear Sanderson's available. It'll only be 500,000 words to write that book too.
Sorry, which?
Sanderson.
Oh, yeah, there you go. Just bring him in. He could be the guy.
Just bring him in. Boom, 500,000 words. Done.
Yeah. That'd be all right. I can handle Brandon Sanderson finishing off my series. I could be all right. Well, actually, never mind. I'd rather do it myself.
You'd rather do it yourself.
I want to be alive for it.
Yeah, that'd be nice too. It kind of presupposes a few things.
Yeah. That's sort of the thing, like I mentioned first too. Like, imagine if I had gone traditionally published, I would never get to write a series like this with that many books in it. It's just going to branch out across this massive space. In fact, I'm pretty sure that a traditional publisher would have been like, "You skipped through this book 3 was 140 years. There's a 70-year gap in the middle of this book. You can't do that." You know, I would have been crucified.
That is definitely one of the problems with going with a traditional press, and you know, I don't have that problem with Severed, but yeah, it'd be kind of like, for instance, if I tried to sell the Garaga series to somebody, well, it doesn't have repeat characters for the first, I don't know, 3,000 years of history it covers.
Yeah, that can be tricky.
Kind of a problem for most publishing houses. They'd be like, what?
Yeah, exactly.
So it's the stories that I want to write, and I'm moving towards something, and I have to write them this way, and it is what it is. I mean, if you don't get it, great. But if you know the readers that enjoyed it were like, when are you writing the next one? When are you doing this? When are you doing that? So it's there's definitely a market there, but publishers, they're looking at, you know, how can we make sure this is going to make us money?
Yeah.
And so they're much more risk adverse than us indie folk are. And indie folk can do some pretty crazy stuff, just like the podcast fiction folk. You know, we did some really groundbreaking things that, like Jake Bible writing an entire novel in Drabble. No publisher would, in their right mind, would have touched that.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
I'm old. What's Drabble?
I'm sorry?
I'm old. What's Drabble?
A Drabble.
Yeah, I'm old. I have no idea what that is.
You don't know what a Drabble is?
I don't.
Good God. Let me get the formal definition here. A short work of fiction of around 100 words in length. It's actually exactly 100 words in length.
So I think you should write one in haiku.
You could. So the way Jake did it is he wrote an entire novel where every scene is basic, and the scene could have 2 dozen drabbles in it, but basically the drabble is a micro scene of what's going on. So it was just, wow. Yeah, it's crazy. That's dead Mac. But, you know, no, we wouldn't be allowed to do that kind of stuff. We wouldn't be allowed to play with these things. We wouldn't be allowed to take these big risks because publishers, they're not going to go for it. Unless you're an established name. If you're an established author with a big following, then they're going to let you do whatever they want or whatever you want most of the time because your name is on it. Therefore, it's going to sell.
Yeah. But you only get so many of those where they don't work before they start saying back to the formula, I would imagine.
Exactly. And you know, that's the other problem with it. But I think it is awesome for, you know, indie authors to reach and basically challenge themselves to do some rather unique things and basically beg, buy, borrow, and steal as much as they possibly can. You know, from the different tropes. When you guys mentioned throwing all the tropes in the same can, what do you think a mashup is?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I'm going to grab these 3 sci-fi tropes, a couple of fantasy tropes, a couple from military sci-fi, and a few things from horror movie monster stuff. Throw them all together in a blender and see what comes out.
Yep.
I mean,
you think I am way more organized than I am. I have no idea what tropes I might be using. I'm just picking out whatever is cool, whatever excites me.
I'm not saying you're consciously doing it. I'm just simply saying that when you're done, that's what it looks like what you did. But
it's like, oh, yeah, of course I did it on purpose. That was exactly what I intended to do.
Brilliant.
Well, I mean, you know, Derelict is basically, you know, my best-selling series now is basically how can we do monsters in space that are really creepy as shit and everything else, and then give scientific explanations for all this other stuff, deal with exosolar life, and imagine what the solar system is going to look like 600 years from now. People dig it. But basically, it's just me ripping off a whole bunch of different ideas from different books and films that I love, and throwing them in there and see what happens.
Yeah, I get every now and then I'll get reviews where someone will actually come down on me for the tropes, and I'll just send them a link to a document that explains that there are only 7 or maybe 11 plots depending on who you ask.
Yeah.
Like, you're like, you ripped this plot off. I'm like, no, they ripped that plot off, and they ripped that plot off, and they all ripped off some guy in Persia 4,000 years ago that was putting his yarn around his like, there's no new stuff, people.
No, not if you're going to put it that way. When you distill the story down to its basic form, it's one of those. It can be thrown into one of those buckets pretty easily.
Yeah, yeah, so, and even we can only write from human experience. We can't write things that no one's ever imagined. So the possibility of finding someone who's imagined something completely fresh in such a way that it can be put into a story is pretty rare. It takes some and also you would need everybody to understand it. You can't just come with some entirely fresh concept and put it in a story without the entire book just people explaining that fresh concept.
Yeah. And that's another problem you have with coming up with creatures, for instance, is we can't really, I can't really, as an author, as a human being, I can't really describe something that I haven't seen before.
Exactly, yeah, or that no one's seen before.
If I like when the alien creature, the first xenomorph came out, that scared the shit out of everybody because it was just so weird looking. Yeah. And basically, it's just, Giger was a genius, but essentially, if you distill the alien down, it's just basically part reptile, part insect, part and borrows some stuff from mammals, and has biped and quadruped facets to it. It's really not that unique, but
now that you explain it all, it just seems less threatening.
It's a nice little toy. You can go
tell one that if it ever shows up, Terry. You're like, you don't seem that threatening to me.
And then it'll spit in your face. But all those things, they all share facets with creatures in real life, and that's part of the mishmash. And even looking things up is basically, you want to get really funky, go look at deep sea creatures.
Yeah.
And start grabbing things from them, and then go look at some of the more bizarre insects and start grabbing shit from them. And then you come up with something that is unique, but really, if you were to deconstruct it, you could see where the author is stealing all these different, or the filmmaker or whomever is grabbing these things to make this thing work, and so that you can recognize it, even if it's something completely off the wall, there will be some kind of recognition with it.
I think you'd run into in a book too. It's easier for movies to do stuff like that, but in a book, you're like, I've got to describe this alien creature in such a way that when I reference its abilities in the future, now the reader's going to understand it each time without me having to constantly say it's the third arm behind the shoulder. Thing,
Yeah, I think Sigler did a really good job of that with the key and the Scorno and the the Quith. Thank you. He did a really good job with putting that up there, because basically you had a character who didn't quite know everything about those creatures.
Right.
And so that's another point where the reader is learning as the character is learning, and that's kind of the way we get around all the exposition bullshit.
Yeah, exactly.
Cutting back to something else you had said, one of the things that I think is great about being well-read, having read so many things, is while we do take little bits and pieces, it's like we've thrown every book or movie we've ever seen into a blender, and the individual elements are there to be plucked out and reimagined and used in our own work.
And eventually you don't even remember where you're stealing it from. You have no idea. It's like, it could be original. I might have read this. I don't know anymore.
When people say, oh, you plagiarized that. What is it?
What is that?
Where did it come from?
You tell me. I have no idea. I think one of the ones that stand out the most for me, you ever read Anne McCaffrey's Dinosaur Planet books?
I think that I have, actually.
She had a race of creatures there called the Thek. And the Thek were really long-lived silicon-based creatures. And they're just basically highly mobile silicon pyramids. And the big ones are like 100 meters tall, and the smaller ones are only a few meters tall. And they can just move through space as well. They don't need spaceships. They can just fly around. That one stands out to me as a pretty unique species. But yeah, most of the other ones you run into, you're like, yeah, that's not that. It's just, I mean, pyramids. I guess pyramid creatures aren't that unique either. You really think about it, but they're easy to describe. It's just
Yes, they are.
on pyramid. You should give those books a shot one time. It's called Dinosaur Planet, Dinosaur Planet Survivors, and then Sassenach, Death of Sleep, and Generation Warriors. It's this whole loosely connected series of books that she wrote over 35 years. They sort of dribbled and drabbled out. And,
I think I've got them on my shelf somewhere. I was a big fan of her Dragon Riders of Pern stuff, so I picked those up at some point, and I think maybe I've read them. Maybe I haven't. Maybe they're just sitting there.
The thing I thought was really interesting is that for her, this is like probably way off topic, but most of her books outside of Pern and outside of the stuff she wrote from like 2000 on are all in the same universe. Like the ship books, the ship who sang and the city who fought and all that. There's another series called the Crystal Singer series, the Dinosaur Planet series. They're actually all in the same universe, and some of the characters even cross over, which is pretty. I think it's about 25 books altogether. They're all in the same universe, which is pretty. I mean, it's not quite as big as Pern, but.
Another interesting thing, since we don't have such a thing as topic on this show. Basically, we wander wherever our thoughts want to go. Marion Zimmer Bradley, some of the stuff that she's written in her Darkover series, it's written as science fiction, but it's really fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
And they are amazing books. And she's no longer with us, but some folks have been continuing to write books in her series, and they are still excellent books.
That's cool. That is pretty neat. I remember I read like one of her prequels to the whole Darkover thing that had some of the origin sci-fi stuff in it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I read the rest of them. Like, actually, I want to read the sci-fi version of this.
I actually fell in love as a kid with I didn't find the book you're talking about, which I can't remember its name. I've got that one as well. But I didn't find it until way late in the process, because what I could only find was what was at my used bookstore.
Gotcha.
I would walk home, and whatever was at the bookstore, that's what my options were.
So you were educated in literature by other people's cast-offs, is what you're telling me.
That's exactly what it is. When I was going to middle school and high school, what I could read was in my small town public library and what I could buy at the used bookstore. So I got all the stuff that I read, everything that was 10 or 20 years older than I was. I didn't read the new stuff. I only got what was older than me.
Yeah.
Which explains why you're such a curmudgeon.
You know, it's really weird because I write what I love to read, and there's an audience of older readers that love what I write because I write the kind of things that I love reading.
Yeah, I find that most of my readers are 35 and above. Like of my youngest large group of readers, which kind of worries me a little bit. I'm like, well, I guess technically at this point, they'll still outlive me, so I'm all right. You know, I can keep writing books. But if they were older than me, I'd be screwed because they'll be dead. And I'll be like 60 years old.
You're big with 80-year-olds, octogenarians. That's your audience. You're doomed.
I'll have to figure out how to branch out.
Well, Michael, it was a lot of fun having you on and talking with you about everything we could possibly think of to talk about.
Yeah.
Why don't you tell the listeners where they can find your work?
Certainly. If you go to my website, which is aeon14, AEON 14.com, you can find my books there. And if you also just go to Amazon, just search for MD Cooper. I'm the only MD Cooper that shows up that I know of. So it'll be me.
Awesome sauce. If you haven't listened to his audiobooks, go out and get them. If you haven't read his books, go do so because they are amazing.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. And listeners, if you want to send us an email and tell us what we missed, what we talked about that we shouldn't have talked about, what we should have asked that we completely forgot about because we were busy chasing squirrels, send us an email at show@deadrobotsociety.com. You can find us on Twitter at Paul_E_Cooley because he's the only one young enough to actually know what Twitter is. You can also find us, better yet, on Facebook at the Listeners of the Dead Robot Society Facebook page. If you are one of our patrons, you can find us on Patreon/DRS podcast. Did I get that right, Paul?
Yes, patreon.com/DRS podcast.
And of course, we cannot do the show without mentioning the good folks at podhoster.com who have the 450 some odd episodes that we've already done for your, I don't know, year of listening. If you want to start at the beginning, like some insane people have done. I don't recommend it. Wouldn't be prudent. Would not be prudent. And Paul, if you would go ahead and mention our $10 patrons.
Absolutely. Our $10 pledge patrons are John Kilgallen, Chris Winder, like winding a cock but blowing in the wind, Isabel Cushy.
Whoa. Why did you have to?
Did I say winding a cock? I meant winding a clock.
Why in the world would you be winding a cock?
I was like, what is the metaphor he's going here? Because I can't figure this one out at all.
Okay, well, yeah. All right, so the font's too small.
Blame the font.
Winding a clock, not blowing in the wind. Maybe it was blowing. This is where I got the.
Wait a minute. Don't stop. Do not put blowing and cock in the same paragraph while you're talking, please.
Isabel Cushy, Andre Conde Moraes. I'm probably still slaughtering that. Robert Slade, DJ Chamberlain, Jonathan Zarusin, J.R. Hanley, Caleb James, and Sue Bayman.
Thank you, folks. We appreciate your support. And of course, patrons, you're going to be listening to this audio unedited, and you're going to catch it a week before the show goes live.
And the YouTube video unedited.
That too. Michael, again, thanks for joining us. It was a real pleasure.
It was a blast. Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much.
Bye, folks.
Bye.
Ciao.